water, especially during this shortage. Absolutely. Every drop counts.
This message was brought to you by the St. Kitts Water Services Department. Learn more at water.gov.kn.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Power Talk. My name is Patrice Harris and I am the Corporate Communications Manager at SKELEC. Power Talk is a radio program brought to you by the St. Kitts Electricity Company Limited, where we share with you all of the latest happenings and updates from SKELEC. This month, August, SKELEC is celebrating its 13th anniversary. SKELEC became a company we transitioned from being the St. Kitts Electricity Department to the St. Kitts Electricity Company Limited on August 1st in 2011. And so this year, 2024, we are celebrating 13 years of being a company. There will be several activities to commemorate this anniversary, which includes a Customer Appreciation Day. So stay tuned to find out when we'll be having our Customer Appreciation Day and all of the goodies that we'll be giving out to our customers on that day. This morning, our radio program will focus on reliability as well as resilience of SKELEC's infrastructure and SKELEC's grid. And who best to explain these plans and efforts for reliability than the members of our engineering management team? I will allow these distinguished gentlemen to introduce themselves. Good morning, gentlemen.
Oh, good morning, Ms. Harris.
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning.
Thank you so much for having us here. Jonathan Kelly, engineering manager. And I want to also echo the sentiments of congratulations and celebrations to SKELEC on its 13th anniversary, and also to you, Ms. Harris, on this very distinguished program, Power Talk. And thank you for inviting Mr. Roberts and myself here this morning to speak on the subject matter of resilience and reliability. Mr. Roberts.
Yes, good morning to persons listening on the radio as well as online. It's certainly a pleasure to be back here on Power Talk to share on this important topic of resilience and reliability. So good morning on, and thanks again, Ms. Harris, for inviting the team.
All right, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we're going to be talking about resilience and reliability. We're going to start the program by explaining, especially in the context of an electric utility, what is meant by resilience and what is meant by reliability. What do we mean when we say we're focusing on resilience and reliability?
All right, and thank you very much for setting the stage there. And to go a little bit further, when we look at any modern society, socioeconomic functions are highly dependent on electric utility services. We're here right now in a studio. The studio is powered by electricity. The transmission of this program right now is being facilitated by, of course, a lot of different media technologies, but are all powered by electricity. Essentially, without electricity, nothing works anymore. So the conversation about, well, how do we keep these electrical utility services reliable and resilient? And the focus on resiliency is something that is very sobering. In recent weeks, we have seen the devastation of Hurricane Beryl when it actually passed across the Caribbean island. Of course, we have to pause for a moment and have solidarity and thoughts for our sister utilities down at Grenlec and Vinlec and those other areas that were negatively impacted. And even to now, there are several of the outlying islands that are still awaiting for full restoration of the electricity services. Persons who are devastated, and probably it's going to take several weeks and months, and several utility, according to the Carolec Disaster Assistance Program, have been providing assistance, and SKELEC and NEVLEC will be looking at also providing some assistance in short order as well. So against that sort of backdrop, we are cognizant and accepting that climate change is something that is real. And it's going to be here for the future. When you look at small island developing states, we are not large major emitters, yet we are being impacted every single year and worse and worse. I mean, when you look at this year's hurricane season, we see that is even overactive and hyperactive, and it keeps on getting worse every single year. So against that sort of context, electrical utilities are now forced to even think outside of the box and be more proactive in terms of how we build our infrastructure, how we maintain our infrastructure to be able to be, let's say, resilient. So what does that word resilience really mean in the context of electric utility operations? Well, essentially, broadly speaking, is being able to withstand some sort of external negative shock to the system. When we say a shock, it's like a negative sort of impact, a sudden impact, unforeseen, whether it is man-made or natural, and being able to recover quickly from that and to be able to continue with normalcy and restoration of services. And how does that actually take place, and what are the different sort of foundational elements that you have to start building? Well, okay, broadly speaking, electrical utility operations, you have the generation or the conversion of electricity, transmission and distribution of that, and then you have the retail services. Along each of those different points, there can be instances or opportunities or occurrences that can negatively impact and cause an interruption to services. So now we're looking at, for example, climate change and hurricanes and stuff. What happens when a hurricane is coming and you see poles, infrastructure can be damaged, causing an interruption? You have to have an outage. How do you build resilience into the network? Well, historically, and we have to give a nod to the designers and the planners of the St. Kitts electricity system. From way back in the, I think, the late 70s into the 80s, you had the approach of putting some of the infrastructure on the ground, especially starting out in the Basse area and extending outwards. And over the years, we have continued in those sort of programs. And what this has done is being able to allow for electricity services, especially in some of the very critical areas, to be able to continue even during severe weather events. We as SKELEC, and as we continue each of our successive budget cycles, have been making allocations and provisions for continuing these sort of interventions for building resilience through undergrounding into our network designs and plans. Now, I've spoken a little bit, now I'm going to shut up and allow Ken to take over from there.
Wow, so Mr. Kelly, you would have done a very good job in providing the context and explaining to persons what resilience is, and you've even gone further into some of the topics that we wanted to explore today about what exactly it would take to build a resilient grid. So we're going to stick a pin right there and allow Mr. Roberts, as you spoke so eloquently about resilience, to speak about reliability. And he can do the same as yourself to speak about what would be some of the contributing factors for a utility company to be as reliable as it can be.
Okay, so hi, so good morning all. So when it comes to reliability, what we are speaking to is quite simply something performing consistently well. And so if I contrast that to what was presented by Mr. Kelly in terms of resilience, you could see reliability as something that is day to day, something that it's more operationally focused. So they are both linked, because you could imagine that a reliable system or system that performs consistently well, more than likely can lead to be more, it is more likely to be resilient. However, when we now start to consider resilience, you're now looking at a more extreme shock and the ability to recover. So now when we now put more focus on reliability, you then get in terms of what are the day-to-day maintenance that one is performing in terms of your programs in that regard. You're also looking at particularly in terms of the standards to which you are building your system. And then from an operational standpoint, you also look at to the technologies you are deploying, because in many systems that we sometimes view as being reliable, as in perform consistently well, it is not as though they do not have issues from time to time. It is oftentimes that they have particular technologies, like I could throw one out, which is stuff like reclosers. And what a recloser simply is in the event of a fault, that particular circuit needs to trip. So similarly to one's house, if there's a electrical fault inside, one wouldn't want a fire or some electrical hazard to happen, and then such, the circuit breaker in your house should trip. Similarly, on the systems, we have many circuit breakers across the island. We have over 50 substations, and similarly, there are a number of circuit breakers at the power station. So the ability for those to isolate a circuit is one thing. However, there is room for technologies or approaches such as reclosers, where in event of a trip, which could be temporary, that the circuit itself will self-close itself, and that way you would only lose power for a few seconds before it returns. And of course, if it were to have a similar fault, then it would stay open for persons to investigate. So when we look at reliability, it is looking at ways in which one can have a system performing consistently well. And from SKELEC standpoint, while we do have our ups and downs, particularly because we are dealing with an aging system, and that's something that we are even right now looking at. So part of reliability is even refleeting, and that's something that we are currently looking at, as well as looking at ways at managing the fleet while we look towards RE. So many of those mechanisms that we are currently looking at is towards improving our reliability, and it's a multi-pronged approach.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for giving that explanation as to what reliability is, what resilience is. We're talking about ensuring that our grid is able to perform well consistently, and if there is a major external shock, that we're able to recover quickly, very safely as well. That's something that we really are focusing on at this point in time. Now, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Roberts sort of started to touch on some of the factors or activities or initiatives or plans that SKELEC is currently engaging in that will ensure that we become more resilient and be more reliable and remain that way. So we've already heard the gentlemen start to speak about refleeting some of the different components that we're engaging in. So I'll give them this opportunity to speak more about some of our future plans, technological advancements, what other initiatives that we're embarking upon to ensure that we are, one, resilient, because we're also in hurricane season, and we've also seen the first major hurricane Beryl out and the type of damage that she has caused, or that hurricane would have caused. And two, overall reliability, because even outside of the hurricane season, we don't want to be one of those utility companies with that reputation like, oh, current gone again, yeah, that's just SKELEC. So we don't want that under the circumstance. So let's start to talk about the initiatives for resilience and the initiatives for reliability.
Good point. So just for making sure everyone understands in terms of operating an islanded electrical utility system. The island of St. Kitts, of course, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, we are not interconnected to any, for example, the North American grid or somewhere European. We have to produce all electricity here on island. We depend on imports of primarily, fossil fuel, and then that is converted into electricity. And at any point in the supply chain, any point in the conversion system, there are always risks associated. So we look at it from the standpoint of sustainability, sustainable island state initiatives, and ensuring the energy security for the island. We have to be able to ensure security of supply, continuity of supply, continuity of availability of conversion processes and proper maintenance and availability of equipment, and then of course transmission, distribution, and the retailing of electricity services. So Mr. Roberts already started touching on the refleeting and allowing to expound on that. Some of this has already been put out in the news, where SKELEC is making major inroads into the building of a new power plant in short order. Some funding has already been secured for that. In the interim, right now, we are also making inroads for having some temporary power supply brought onto the grid while we're doing our maintenance and upgrading, extending the life of an aging fleet. We have a fleet, some of these are older than some of us here in this room. We have to continue operating those. And then outward extending from that, if you look at it as the power generation is at the heart, then you have the transmission and distribution system. And as I already touched on in terms of the interventions being made there, we are at the same time building out new infrastructure but maintaining aged infrastructure. And in our considerations, let's look at the way how, for example, infrastructure was being built 20, 30 years ago. Now considerations have to now look at wind loading and wind shear resistance. How can we actually now change, for example, and upgrade classification of poles and infrastructure to be able to withstand wind loading? And it's not possible to always place all infrastructure underground everywhere across the island. So we have to make those that are overhead as resilient as possible. But at the same time now we're looking at underground and of it critical, especially backbone and the main feeders as best as possible to be able to provide that insulation from overhead damages that are normally incurred during severe storms and weather. But there are also risks that are coming from fire events, and this is something that sometimes persons are not always aware of. We do have that sort of cyclical cycle where sometimes you see heavy rains and winds, and other times you see severe temperatures, and then you have fires and bushfires associated with that. These sometimes negatively impact our overhead infrastructure. So even the application of fire retardant, building in resilience there to our poles, and then also having maybe poles that have fire retardant materials already applied while already ordering them, is our approach that we are also taking into consideration as well.
All right, Mr. Kelly, thank you for that. And I know that we would have had some underground projects definitely within the last 5 years, so we're happy to hear that that is still continuing, and we're looking at the classification of the types of poles that we're using so that they can withstand stronger wind bands. And as we're speaking about resilience, I do also want to take this opportunity to explain that in the event that we do get struck with like a category 5 hurricane, there's only so much that preparation can do, that the appropriate type of material can help us to withstand the damage. There will be some damage there, so I don't want people to walk away with the notion thinking like, hey, they're doing all of these things but there still is this damage and it's still taking a while for power to come back. There's only so much preparation you can do for that any catastrophic storm of that nature. So yes, we are doing what we can to ensure that we reduce the damage as much as is reasonably possible, but there must be an understanding that there will be damage and there will be manual work to restore power to our consumers. So I just want to ensure that that is understood. So Mr. Roberts, Mr. Kelly has already indicated that you will speak on these other areas, but he spoke about a new power plant that we've already started to do some groundwork on, and a temporary power plant that is almost towards completion. So if you can speak to both of those initiatives, that would be really awesome this morning.
Okay, so I will speak to them in the overall context of power systems planning and transformation. So in the context of a power system and system planning, one has to always consider where you are, where you are currently, where you are going. So where we are currently is we've had a fleet that is has been powered by diesel for like a number of years, and it's so that is where our thermal power. Now where we are looking to go based on the mandates, the internal mandates as well as that of the shareholder, is that of sustainable energy towards which is a key component of the sustainable island state. Now getting from where we are currently to where we are going requires in some way a bridge. There needs to be some bridge from one to the other, else the questions of reliability will come into play. Because if you wait until one is in order for the other, then you're only making it less likely for it to be consistent in performing well. So from from a long-term standpoint, I would want to start it because I want persons to understand that when we plan, we are planning for long-term. We are looking at solutions that will that going 20, 30 years out will be a benefit for the nation. So in that regard, the new plan that we're looking at is one that should be in principle a hybrid plan. That's what we are looking at. But to make it simply, we are looking for a plan that we would say would be a platform for a platform for accommodating variable renewable energy sources. So what that means is we anticipate definitely in less than in about 3 to 5 years, but definitely within 2 years, to have a significant amount of variable renewable energy, particularly solar. And so you want to have a power plant that is designed at inception to be able to moderate or be able to handle the variation in that particular power, as well as maintain reliability. So with that said, that plant, based on the current timelines we're looking at, that is on about the 2 to 3 year timeline. Now, while we work on that for the next 18 months towards hopefully having something on the ground between 24 months to 36 months, we need a bridge, and the bridge is twofold. One, to assist us in having some spare capacity while we do maintenance on our current fleet, as well as the reality is, since the COVID pandemic, the grid and the actual load demand has picked back up, and I could at least say, I think for this year we have reached our newest peak, and that is since inception, and that's not just in the context of SKELEC, but that is going back since electricity was since electricity was generated on the island and distributed. And that peak was, I think, 29 megawatts. So we are now anticipating getting closer to even 30 megawatts. When I joined SKELEC in 2014, our peak was somewhere closer to 23, 24. To get into 25 megawatts was considered a very high peak. Now we are speaking 29 megawatts going towards 30. So just in the last decade, we are speaking about 4 to 5 megawatts of additional load demand on the system, and there hasn't been any appreciable increase in capacity for our fixed unit sample. Now we have had some mobile units that has allowed us to be able to manage things for the most part, but from a fixed unit and from a like overall system sample. So with that said, it's been necessary now as we look at planning towards the long term to put in place a bridging mechanism, and in that case we are looking to commission sometime this month 6 megawatts of temporary power, and that we hope, as I said, it is towards that larger long-term goal, one, and two, it is towards us maintaining and as well as to a degree improving our reliability.
All right, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Roberts. I'm going to open the phone lines now. If there is any caller who would like to call and contribute, ask any questions, now is the time for you to do so. Mr. Roberts would have explained that there's a long-term plan and there is a little fix in between before we get to the long-term plan. And if you drive down on Wellington Road right now, you will see that there's some considerable work and an infrastructure that is being built adjacent to SKELEC's transmission and distribution campus and on the opposite side of our power plant. So that is a 6 megawatt power plant that is being built, that should be there for 1 year in the first instance, and that will provide us an additional supply of 6 megawatts so that we can continue our maintenance program over at the power plant and until we can get our new fleet in. So there is some effort, a very significant effort actually, that is being undertaken to ensure that we are reliable, that you have power. You will have heard Mr. Roberts mention of how much the load has grown within the last 10 years, and I will even say even within the last 5 years since Mr. Kelly and I joined SKELEC, how much it has grown, because we are developing.
Yeah.
We have lots of large projects and developments that are coming on stream, housing projects, all of these things are coming on stream. And it means that we have to be able to produce that electricity so that you can be supplied with that electricity. So Mr. Roberts, Mr. Kelly, I have this interesting question. What can customers do? How can they, our consumers and customers, what is it that they can do, any initiative that they can undertake as we are faced with these challenges and the new plans that we have to roll out? What should they do?
All of your questions are always interesting. Okay, now there is something that we've observed very recently, a trend where sometimes persons are very adversarial towards the electrical utility when it comes to their perception and understanding of electrical utility services, reliability, expectation, and all that. And some of the times they don't realize there's a certain onus and responsibility on their end. For example, we cannot come into your premises and your homes and be, for example, telling you, well, how are you deploying all of your electrical appliances? Are you properly protecting them? Are you ensuring that if you are expanding, you're increasing your number of appliances, are you ensuring that your circuitry, electrical wiring, and all the infrastructure is up to the right standard so that you can have safe operation of your equipment? And we are starting to see persons having issues, and they often then come in and trying to seek compensation from the utility. So the first thing is to say, look, persons, please be aware that especially as we're in the middle of the traditional peak of the hurricane season that we're going towards, that it's very important for you to be protecting your equipment and appliances, ensuring that you have all of the vegetation around your yard and everything properly trimmed, making sure if there's anything close in proximity of your power lines, and you could inform SKELEC for that, please do that as well. Protection of your property and all of your assets, very, very important as well. Now, in addition to that, in terms of the long-term plan and the future that Mr. Roberts would have touched on, there are certain opportunities that are soon going to be available, and it comes from the energy transition and renewable energy rollout. And more will, of course, come out in terms of that, how the general public can become even further involved and contributing to that energy transition process. That process needs to be prepared and aware of, but we won't get into that at this particular moment. So what's over there?
On the customer question in terms of what customers can be looking at, well, for one, because the use of electricity is also connected to one's bill, I think there are ways that customers could look at conserving. There's always opportunities for conserving, and we are at times they couldn't say bombarded, but at times customers are asking questions in terms of why their bill is the sort of level that it's at. And of course we've been having some very hot days recently, so I think it goes hand in hand between conservation, but ultimately with I suppose some policies that I'm aware is in the works, from that of the government and otherwise, that there will be avenues for customers to a degree supplement their electricity through the use of solar and otherwise, and have some sort of incentive. So there would need to be a mix to which SKELEC is supportive of, and stuff like that, and those things will be rolled out over the next few months to a year. All
right, so thank you, Mr. Roberts, thank you, Mr. Kelly. As they both would have mentioned, it's important to protect your appliances, because we don't want for there to be a situation where you're coming to SKELEC pointing fingers like, hey, my appliances are damaged, but you did not engage in the protection of your appliances before. That's important. It's also important, as Mr. Roberts would have mentioned, I thought he was going a different direction, so I didn't want to say. It's also important for you to, when you get your bill, open it. When you get your bill, look at the consumption, right? Let's start there. Look at the consumption. Look at how much you would have used. If it is that the amount that you're being charged is not one that is manageable for you, then the only other thing that you can do is manage your consumption, which means conserve the electricity. Now, I have interesting conversations with persons on a regular basis. Like, Patrice, in this time, you're telling people that we don't need to have ACs. Okay, if it is that AC is now a modern part of life, it is a part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and kids and neighbors, that's no problem. But you have to now look at the appliances that you're purchasing. Are they energy efficient appliances? Because again, your bill is closely linked to, it is linked, inextricably linked to your consumption. So bear that in mind. It's a very interesting dynamic that you have to pay attention to. If it is that the ACs are mandatory within your households, when you get the bill, you have to recognize that the bill will match that consumption. So be energy efficient, and also, as much as is reasonably possible, try to conserve energy. For those persons who are out in the field, who are working on these large like tractors and backhoes, etc., it's very important that you engage with SKELEC before you go and dig. Now, it's much more difficult to identify an underground fault and to have repairs to that fault than any overhead fault. So if you go and you dig, not only could there be a major hazard in terms of death or a large community losing power, but that's why it's important that you get in contact with SKELEC even before you go and you dig. These are very, very important when we think about reliability and when we think about resilience. There are also some persons who, they come and they complain and they're still on temporary supplies. Temporary supplies are designed to be temporary. So if you are out of that phase where your house is fully built, it's time for you now to upgrade to your permanent supply, so that the power that's going to your home, everything is designed for what it was intended to be. Now, these are just my additions. Continue to practice electrical safety and also be our ears and our eyes. We can't see everything. We don't have that technology as yet. Mr. Roberts and Mr. Kelly, they're working very hard on getting those technologies for us, so that we don't necessarily have to always rely on the consumer calls about the faults. But until we get there, we expect you to help us in this regard. And for the persons who say, well, I don't know I don't know who to call, me on money on my phone, we'll give you all of the options as to how you can get in contact with us. First, you can call 465-2013, that's our emergency hotline. You can also call 600 from a cell phone, that's also our emergency hotline. We have 465-2000, which is our automated customer support portal that you can call and you can leave a message there, and someone will check it and we'll have somebody come and check to see the fault that you would have reported. You can also reach us on Facebook. You can send us a message. You can also report that fault on our website. There are numerous ways. If you want us to update it as to everything that's happening with SKELEC, our website, our Facebook, calling 465-2000, you'll hear the outages for the day. And you can also follow our WhatsApp channel, where we share all of the updates and the latest happening. So you have a major role to play as it relates to SKELEC's reliability and resilience and our overall operations, so that we can be a better utility for you. Gentlemen, we're just about to wrap up the program. I would like for both of you to provide your 30 seconds parting words as we wrap up this program this morning.
Well, once again, Ms. Harris, thank you very much for having us here on this very prestigious program, and at 13 years of celebration. We want to give a nod to all those who went before us, who would have built out, the electricity infrastructure here in St. Kitts and Farm, SKELEC. And for us now, this generation, we take on the mantle and the challenge to take it to the next level, continuously improving and providing reliable and resilient electricity, very critical, essential service to the island of St. Kitts and the Federation at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
And thanks again to the listening public, and I would like to thank the workers that are there at the plant, in the field, and the TND in the metering department, like our main office, customer service, the entire team, because it's a team effort, and it's a challenge from time to time. So, but I think the team has always rise to the occasion, and on this our 13th anniversary, I think it's a time of reflection, particularly as we are at a point of pivot and at a point of transition, at a point of transformation, that I think it allows us to reflect on what we have been able to accomplish and maintain and sustain, sustain up to this point towards what we are looking to, which is a brighter and even more sustainable company. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for joining me on air this morning. Today we were discussing SKELEC's resilience and reliability plans. We want to thank you for tuning in. Remember, SKELEC is the nation's leading utility provider, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Bye-bye.
Reaching you wherever you are. ZIZ